Now, many of us will be taking the children out trick-or-treating this evening and over the weekend, bobbing for apples, we'll be making a bonfire, we'll be doing all of that. But do you actually have any idea where these customs originate from? And in fact, how much do you actually really know about Halloween? Well, if you don't know very much, we can sort that out for you because we have a man who does with us. It's author and historian Joe McGowan from Sligo. Good morning, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome on the programme, and you've got a book as well, which we'll talk about a little later on, called The Bitter Wind. So let's first of all talk about Halloween. What's the background to it?
Well, the background to Halloween goes back a long way. It goes back to the Iron Age Celts. Samhain was a big festival for them. They broke the year up into two halves, the light half and the dark half. The dark half...
So that'll be spring, summer, autumn, winter, effectively, is it?
More or less, yes. The dark half started at Samhain. That was their new year. And there were as many celebrations at Samhain, or their new year, as we have now at Christmas, New Year's. There was a great assembly at Tara, and all of the 5 provinces assembled there. They had horse racing, they made laws at that particular time. There was feasting, there was merrymaking. There was all of that happening at that time. But it was also a time of the supernatural. It was also a time when the light half was finished on the eve of Samhain and before the dark half started, say at 12 midnight. Neither the light half nor the dark half had power at that time, so the forces of anarchy could be released.
So there was a sort of a portal into the other world.
There was a portal into the other world. The cemeteries opened and the spirits of the dead came back to their homes.
So this is where Halloween and All Souls and all the rest of it comes from, is it?
Of course, it has gained as it's gone on through the years, particularly in the last 20 or 30, 40 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. But essentially, the fairy forts would open as well. And it wasn't really a scary time. People expected the spirits, the holy souls in purgatory, to be able to be released at that time and come back to their old homes. Nothing scary about it. They came in. Some people would see them, some people wouldn't.
They'd be welcomed, wouldn't we?
They'd be welcomed.
To go back and visit it one more time.
Absolutely. Food would be left out for them, whatever foods were available in the house. And also for the fairies passing by. You wanted to placate the fairies as well. There was an old custom in Ireland, of course up until the 1950s or 60s, there was no plumbing in houses. So people washed, they went to the well for water, they washed in the basin. And when they were finished with the water, they threw it out. Now, throwing water out at night was a problem any time of the year, but it was highly recommended that on that particular night, before you threw water out, you said, Hugada Hugada Ishka Salak, which translated means, here's to you, dirty water. So that the holy souls who would be passing by, or the spirits who came out of the fairy forts passing by, wouldn't be drenched with the water. That was a custom back then, which died out around the 1960s.
We concentrate on, I mean, in some senses, for fun, the whole scaring kids and ghouls and ghosties and all the rest of it. But I mean, there were people who took all this very, very seriously. And I mean, it manifests itself in some of our graveyards, headstones with things carved on faces carved on them and all the rest of it. How do they relate to Halloween, or do they?
Well, again, there was an exchange between the mortal world, the human world. This image that we see up here at the moment comes from Keelogues and Ballintralig, not so far away from me. That stone head that you see there has probably been there. There was an old monastery there at a time. Back around 1588 it was destroyed, but the stone head remains. And even today it's believed, and the belief is firm today, that if you have toothache and you go to the graveyard and kiss the stone head and ask for the toothache to be cured, it will be cured.
Really?
Now,
and at this time of the year, or any time of the year?
Well, at any time of the year, but particularly at Halloween.
Oh, very good.
Just even a step further than that, it was recommended for people suffering with toothache, because again, we're talking about times in the 1800s, 1900s, when dentists were just not available and people used home cures. Well, one of the home cures was to go to the graveyard and find a skull and to take a tooth from the skull with your own tooth, and that would cure your toothache for the year. Now, skulls, we may remember, in famine times and in times of fever in Ireland, people weren't buried that way.
They were very plentiful,
People were dying with the hundreds and the thousands. It wasn't unusual to go into a graveyard and find bones.
Right, we'll talk about... there are certain foods that are very common around this time, nuts and apples and things like that. And of course the origin of that is that hazelnuts would have been harvested in Ireland back in those days. They would have come in around now. Apples, of course, come in around September and the autumn. So that was really the root of the proliferation of those. There's no great secret to it, is there?
No, not really. It was a celebration of the harvest, if you like. Similar to the American Thanksgiving of today.
Yeah.
And there weren't as many fruits available. Of course, in the past 2 or 3 decades or something like that, fruits are coming in from all over the world. But at that particular time, hazelnuts, you would have hazelnuts. And there were no supermarkets at that time, and very little money.
And of course, the other thing is as well, given the limited diet at the time, nuts would have been a very good form of protein, because meat would have been very rare and very scarce. People would have had meat maybe once or twice a year if they were lucky.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So the origin of bobbing for the apples is this is basically, you don't have...
It's a supernatural occurrence.
Yes, the spirit is stirring. So people, obviously, and we have to remember back, people would have had very little in those days. So a bucket and a bit of water, throw a few apples into it, and keeps the kids amused for the whole night.
Well, that was part of the games. That was just fun.
So this is fun born out of poverty,
well, it's fun born out of using whatever you had. We had no Xboxes, no money for Xboxes at that time. Things have changed so much in the past 40 or 50 years. At that time, when children went outside to play, they used a hoop of an old bicycle and a stick just to beat it along the road, or maybe a catapult or something like that. Things have changed altogether now.
Well, mind you, the way we're going, Joe, we could be back there again soon enough. Listen to me, tell us about this book, The Bitter Wind.
Well, this book came out about 2 or 3 months ago, and thank you for asking. It has it goes back to the 1950s, 1960s, how people lived in times when there was no mechanisation. People lived with the strength of their back, with ordinary tools and that sort of thing. The superstitions that sustained them. In fact, the image there of the stone head is one of a block of pictures that's in here. We have moved so fast that we almost forget how things were then. Everything now is done by mechanisation and by power.
Well, listen to me. Do you know what? It might be a handy route map to the future, because we might we might be back there again soon. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for illuminating us on all of that, and we wish you well with the book, available in all good bookstores. That's Joe McGowan.